I am the first memory. The hush has passed, and the song has begun. Edgehaven called her a monster. The Foggrave called her nothing. But the Heartgrove calls her home. Kaelin has reached the center of the world. She has passed the trials of water, light, and silence. Now she stands before the Heartwood, the wounded pillar of all that is. To touch the tree is to touch the beginning of time. It is to remember 1,000 lives you never lived, and a promise that was broken before you were born. Today, the outcast becomes the key. This is Chapter 10. The Heartgrove Awakens.
Kaelin emerged from the fading echoes of the Foggrave like a swimmer breaking the surface for air. The bone-white mist dissolved behind her. Its profound silence was shattered by a sound so the sound was a constant vibration that resonated in the air and in the ground beneath her feet. Kaelin felt it. It was a low, powerful note, a slow heartbeat that acted as the life pulse of the world. It called to a place deep within her that she had never known existed. Her spirit, steeled by the trials of the night, recognized the sound as a destination. Her body, however, remained a vessel of mortal limits. She ached with a profound weariness. As she walked, the forest began to change. The transformation was so complete that it burned away the last of her exhaustion. The grim, testing nature of the fen had vanished. This place was different. The humble moss that had been her only guide now flared with a brilliant, confident light. It was no longer just a path. The glow spread outward, forming a winding trail of luminous flora, vines and impossible flowers that changed from soft blue to a welcoming gold as she approached. These were the blooming veins, a living network guiding her to the heart. The trees were no longer silent giants. They seemed to lean inward as she passed, their ancient branches lifting to clear her way in a gesture of profound respect. The air had been transformed. The damp chill of the hollow was gone, replaced by a nourishing warmth. The grove was thick with 1,000 new scents, rich soil, night-blooming petals, and the clean promise of running water. The hostile atmosphere of the outer woods had been replaced by an overwhelming sense of ancient peace. This was not just another part of the forest. This was a sanctuary. Kaelin walked in a state of quiet awe. Her fear and her grief seemed to lift from her shoulders, held at bay by the undeniable magic of the grove. Her heart had been a tight, guarded fist for as long as she could remember. Now it began to unclench. She was a pilgrim who had finally reached the sacred city. Even Rowan had changed. The watchful guard dog was gone. He walked beside her with an easy gait, his nose twitching with curiosity rather than suspicion. His tail gave a few gentle wags. As they reached the inner circle, he lowered his head for a moment in a gesture that looked impossibly like a bow. A soft sound of recognition escaped his throat. He, too, recognized this place. He knew they had arrived somewhere truly special. The blooming veins led them onward. With every step, the thrumming heartbeat of the grove grew more insistent. It was no longer a background vibration. It was a melodic hum that pulled Kaelin forward. It was a song of welcome that promised answers to questions she hadn't yet learned how to ask. The path wound through a quiet copse of ancient trees whose leaves rustled in a soft murmur. Faint whispers drifted from the grove of echoes, telling stories in a language just beyond her understanding. As she pushed past the last of the willows, the trees opened up. The thrumming sound swelled into an all-encompassing song. Kaelin stood at the edge of a large, circular clearing. In its center, she saw the source. Kaelin stepped from the shadows of the willows and into the clearing. Her breath was lost in a silent rush of awe. The source of the deep, humming song that had filled her soul was not a creature or a place. It was impossibly both. In the absolute center of the sanctuary stood the Heartwood tree. It was a thing of impossible scale. The tree defied every mortal notion of what nature should be. Its base was a colossal marriage of dark, primordial stone and gnarled, living wood. The trunk was so wide it would have taken her a dozen paces just to walk past it. The roots, thick as a man's waist, were not buried in the earth, but seemed to be the earth, great, stony knuckles rising from the ground before plunging back into the deep soil. Arranged in a wide circle around the base stood a ring of massive, moss-covered monoliths. Each was etched with faint, spiraling patterns. She had found the Pact stone circle. From this monumental base, the trunk rose into the night sky, a pillar connecting the world to the heavens. It was not simple wood. Patches of the surface were like polished granite, while others were covered in a thick, living bark that seemed to flow with a slow, ancient life. Its highest branches were lost in the darkness above, forming a canopy that appeared to scrape the stars. It was less a tree and more a mountain that had found the will to grow leaves. A great, jagged crack ran down its side, a wound of immense age. It looked as if the tree had been struck by a bolt of lightning forged in the heart of a dying sun millennia ago. The edges of the scar were blackened and smooth. From deep within the breach, a wounded light pulsed. It was a soft, golden luminescence that beat in perfect time with the thrumming song that filled the air. This was the forest's own slow, powerful heartbeat. Kaelin felt an overwhelming urge to approach, a pull that was both deeply personal and profoundly ancient. She walked forward. Her footsteps were silent on the carpet of glowing moss. Rowan followed her to the edge of the monoliths, but went no further. He sat on his haunches, just outside the ring of ancient stones, understanding this was a step she had to take alone. The air around the tree was thick with a palpable weight. It was a vibrant tension that made the hair on Kaelin's arms stand on end and her skin tingle. This was a place where the veil between worlds had worn thin. As she drew closer, the necklace grew hot against her chest. It was no longer a gentle, comforting heat. It was a vibrant, living warmth. The wooden spiral began to vibrate, a perfect, tiny echo of the great tree's resonant hum. This was it. The recognition was not a thought, but a certainty. This was the Heartgrove. It was the source of the whisper that had called to her from the edge of the world. It was the destination her parents had sought, the place they had spoken of in hushed tones. This was the heart of everything. She stood before the colossal trunk, a small, insignificant creature in the presence of something eternal. The sheer scale of the tree made her own life feel like a single leaf in a vast forest. The trials of the night had led her here. The stones, the lake, the illusions, and the void. They had been the keys. This was the lock. With a hand that trembled with a profound and sacred awe, Kaelin reached out. Her fingers brushed against the strange, stone-like bark. It was not cold like rock, nor was it warm like living wood. It was both, a fusion of life and endurance. It pulsed with the same deep, rhythmic beat that now thrummed through her entire body. The moment her fingertips made contact, the deep hum of the tree surged up her arm. It was a jolt of pure life, taking a final, shuddering breath. She pressed her palm flat against the surface. The world dissolved. The thrumming psalm exploded into a deafening roar. The golden light became a blinding, absolute white. The scent of the forest, the feeling of the ground, and the very sense of her own body vanished in a total sensory explosion. Her consciousness was ripped from its moorings. Kaelin was plunged headfirst into the raging, chaotic river of the Heartwood soul. There was no transition, no gentle slide into a dream. One moment, Kaelin was a girl with her hand pressed against the bark. The next, she was pure consciousness adrift in an ocean of raw, untranslated power. The experience lacked a narrative. It was a chaotic, simultaneous flood of sight, sound, and feeling. 1,000 years of memory and magic poured into her mind in a single, shattering instant. Sound arrived first. A roar of 1,000 voices that lacked the structure of words. She heard the deep, grinding speech of stone and the whispering song of ancient leaves. The sharp, snapping crackle of fire wrestled with the fluid, murmuring tongue of water. Woven through this elemental symphony were human voices. Dozens of them surged from the past, speaking in a language Kaelin had never heard, yet understood with a certainty that settled directly in her soul. Resonant phrases echoed in the storm, a solemn vow to keep the balance, a desperate warning against a stillness that consumes, and the names of ancient spirits, Wisp-Whirl, Ashroot, and the Sentinel, spoken with a mixture of ancient respect and fear. Sight followed as a barrage of fragmented, burning images flashed against the canvas of her mind. Abstract symbols blazed into existence before fading back into the dark. These were the 9 sigils. She saw a spiral etched in a tree ring, a flickering flame held in the cradle of a leaf, and a perfect circle cracked through its center. They were more than mere pictures. They were fundamental laws, concepts so potent they possessed a physical weight. Faces flickered in the storm, too quick to grasp yet impossible to forget. She saw her parents. They were younger then. Their faces were not filled with the fear she remembered, but with a hard-won determination as they pressed their own hands to this very tree. Other faces followed, men and women from ages past. Their clothes were strange, and their features weathered by suns she had never seen, but their eyes all held the same look of solemn duty. They have my mother's eyes, Kaelin realized with a jolt that cut through the chaos. This was her lineage. They were the Pact keepers. The vision sharpened, focusing on the Heartwood tree itself. She saw it in its prime, whole and unscarred, blazing with a light so powerful it acted as a sun in the heart of the forest. Then came the catastrophe. A wave of darkness arrived, a creeping, orderly silence that was not an absence of sound, but an active, consuming force. She watched the great crack form on the trunk. It was not caused by lightning, but by an internal, spiritual agony as the tree fought to contain the encroaching void. The brilliant light dimmed, fading to the wounded pulse she had seen in the clearing. But it was the feeling that truly broke her. Kaelin felt the immense, joyful power of the Pact at its creation, a perfect, harmonious chord struck between the mortal and the spirit worlds. Then came the crushing, discordant sorrow of its breaking. It was a wound that echoed through every root and leaf of the Elderbranch. She felt the deep, abiding pain of the wounded tree, a constant, weary ache that had lasted for centuries. Through the flood of history, the forest's ancient consciousness turned its full attention upon her. This was not a passive watchfulness. It was an active, probing intelligence. It sifted through her memories, her fears, and her smallest hopes. It recognized the blood in her veins. It acknowledged the shape of her spirit and the potential that lay dormant within her, in the silence of her mind. The tree gave her a title that resonated with the force of a great bell, the key, the seed of renewal. The influx of power was too much. Her mortal mind was a tiny vessel overflowing with a river of raw history. It was a beautiful and terrible agony to be connected to everything and simultaneously ripped apart by it. Just as her consciousness reached its breaking point, the vision ended. The roar of 1,000 voices became the quiet hum of the grove. The blinding white light returned to a gentle golden pulse. The feeling of being everywhere collapsed into the sharp, specific sensation of her own body. Kaelin was thrown back, stumbling away from the tree as if from a physical blow. She landed hard on the mossy ground. Air fled her lungs. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind, a storm of phantom sounds and burning images. Then a wet nose nudged her cheek. Rowan was there, his one good eye wide with a protective worry. He licked the tears she hadn't realized she was shedding. He was her anchor, a tangible piece of loyalty in a world that had just dissolved into eternity and back. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not with fear, but with the overwhelming aftershock of the vision. She was just an outcast from a small village, yet she had just shared a breath with the timeless, and it had looked back at her and called her by name. Kaelin lay on the soft, glowing moss. Her chest felt tight as she dragged air back into her lungs. The world swam back into focus, a dizzying kaleidoscope of emerald and gold. The chaotic symphony of the vision still echoed in her mind. She felt scoured hollow, remade, as if every part of her had been dismantled and reassembled in an unfamiliar shape. Slowly, she pushed herself into a sitting position. Her limbs trembled with a mixture of exhaustion and an ancient, resonant energy. She looked up at the Heartwood tree and the breath caught in her throat. The ancient wood had changed. The light pulsing from the great wounded breach was no longer a faint flicker. It had become a steady, healthy golden glow that pushed back the shadows of the clearing. It was still a heartbeat, but it was the beat of a heart beginning to heal. Her touch and her connection to the Pact had provided the spark the tree required to kindle a new flame. The surge of life did not go unnoticed. A signal rippled out from the tree and into the very stones of the sanctuary. It began with a low, deep, grinding sound. The noise carried a sense of immense tension, the sound of a mountain shifting on its foundations. Kaelin's eyes darted around the clearing. She saw nothing but the great trees and the moss-covered boulders scattered among the packed stone circle. These rocks had been silent witnesses to the ages, but now one of them moved. The largest boulder, a colossal stone covered in a thick blanket of moss and lichens, began to unfold. With the sound of stone grating on stone, the breaches in the rock widened to reveal hidden joints. A section of the stone lifted, revealing a massive limb of twisted, petrified wood. Another shifted to become a thick, stony leg. The moss and lichens were not a covering, they were a living hide. The boulder was a guardian waking from a slumber so deep it had become one with the earth. The sentinel had been sleeping in the hollow of still roots, a chamber deep beneath the clearing, until Kaelin's awakening of the Heartwood called it forth. The creature rose to its full height, a colossus of living rock and ancient iron-hard timber. It was the oak sentinel. The great protector had waited centuries for a sign. Kaelin was that sign. A wood and stone colossus turned its head with a slow, deliberate movement that possessed the gravity of ages. Its face was a mask of bark and granite. 2 points of light ignited deep within its features, eyes like pools of glowing amber that held the memory of forgotten eons. The sentinel fixed its gaze upon her. In that look, Kaelin felt a profound and impartial assessment. It did not speak with a mouth. The voice was not a sound heard with ears, but a rumbling presence that resonated directly in her mind. The sound resembled the grinding of mountains and the slow growth of roots through bedrock. It spoke the words that would take the broken pieces of her life and forge them into a single, terrifying purpose. The forest has accepted you. The Heartwood knows its own. The voice was a deep truth that settled in her soul. But the pact is broken. The sigils are lost. The words confirmed the sorrow she had felt in the vision, a heavy and tragic announcement. Then came the final, life-altering question. It was a weight and a choice, laid at the feet of a girl who had been an outcast only a day before. Will you be the one to restore it?
The question has been asked. The forest has named its champion, and the stone has found its voice. Kaelin is no longer an outcast of Edgehaven. She is the seed of renewal. The vision has shown her the truth. The pact is broken, the sigils are scattered, and a great stillness is coming to devour the world. She has been given the weight of 1,000 years. She has been asked to restore what was lost. Will she take the path, or will she let the light fail? At the foundation of this record, I have left the way to find your guardian. You will need them, for the journey has only truly just begun. In our next meeting, the quest for the sigils begins. I remain the first memory. Watch the shadows, for they are watching you.